Hi guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Stephen Fawcett. Steve is one of the co-founders of JST Compete, one of the most prominent CrossFit programming and coaching companies out there. He was the first Brit to go to the CrossFit Games as an individual in 2015, and generally all-round very talented sportsman. However, the thing that really earned my respect when I went up to Wigan once, we went to Nando's, and Steve's such a celebrity in Wigan that the whole table got the meal free. And that, I mean, I knew he was a CrossFit Games athlete, but that's when I realised it was actually a really big deal.
When you get
This is
free
a really,
Nando's.
I would have ordered more if I'd known. But Steve's had, yeah, we have a really good chat. We go through his background prior to CrossFit, his talents in other sports. We go really deep on mental health and sort of the darker side of elite competition, which I think needs to be discussed more, as well as some interesting perspectives on the professionalism in CrossFit and how it might go to the Olympics in future. Really fun episode for the two of us, so I hope you enjoy it. But before we get into it, as always, a big thank you to our show sponsor, Wit Fitness. Please check them out at One New Change in St. Paul's or at the website wit-fitness.com and use our discount code LL15 to get 15% off your purchase. Right, let's get into it.
Let's go.
Steve, welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Bit of a disrupted sleep last night with the little one, but we're alive and we're good to go for another Friday.
Brilliant. For our listeners who might not know who you are, could you give us a quick intro on who you are, what you do,
God.
and justify why you're here, basically?
Yeah, it depends how long we've got now. So CrossFitter for the last 11 years now. It will be. Pretty much got into CrossFit, coaching CrossFit at the same time. I've actually just participated in CrossFit. Quickly got into the competitive scene, realised like that's the direction I wanted to go down. And then the majority of the last 10 years of my life has been focused around training to compete. Got myself regionals from 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. Got myself to the games as an individual in 2015 out the Meridian region, and then since then had two more appearances in 2017 and 19 on a team. And it was around about 2016 time, like after I competed as an individual, did I start putting more of my time and energy into coaching and running the business JST Compete, the online coaching business. Then it was a kind of a juggling act of the two for a few years, and then more recently over the last year or probably 2 years now, the priority has been the business, and my training is just kind of on the side, however it fits in.
Brilliant. And something I think not many people know about you is that you were an elite table tennis player before CrossFit. Can you tell us about that, please?
Actually, I'm impressed that you remembered that, because it must have been a few years ago that I told you that.
Yeah.
I bet it was when you assessed me, actually. Did you remember from the assessment?
Yeah. I think so. I could tell from the way your body moved that, you're a pencil gripper.
To be honest, I represented England when I was 13 and 14.
Wow.
We went to Denmark and Germany it was like the youth game. So I'm not sure how you describe it really. It was, there's a load of towns that are around the country that it's similar in the way of like Commonwealth Games, but something just been created for a load of different sports. I'm not sure if it's just the region that I grew up in where we got selected from, but then went on to be in the England development squad as well.
Amazing. What did that entail?
That was a trip down to Blackpool every week, which was only 40 minutes away from. I grew up in Lancaster and Morecambe, so trip down to the seaside every week. Couple of hours of training with some pros at the time, with some other players. that were at a kind of similar level. So yeah, it was good. I was juggling that as well as about 5 other sports as a 13-year-old, as most CrossFitters do.
Have
And
you always
how
been
did
quite into competition then, as a kid and stuff? Or was you always quite a competitive child?
Yeah, a million. Yeah,
Yeah,
1,000,000%. Just like even I always try and remember back. Like, what's the first thought I had what's the earliest I can
yeah,
remember as a child? And it's sport and playing matches or running in the sports day at primary school. Like,
yeah.
I don't remember much else other than like sporting events as a kid, which to me just shows that was just all I've ever been about, really. From as young as what I can probably remember as 6,
Yeah.
running egg, what was it? Whether it was running egg and spoon race or playing
Yeah.
hockey, playing
Yeah.
football, table tennis. Yeah, yeah, it's always been. I've always wanted to do something and kind of like, whether it's competing it and try and beat other people or just try and get the best that I can at like a certain sport.
what
Yeah,
was that process of narrowing down the sports that you played like? Because if you do so many, you're obviously very good at table tennis. Did you drop the other ones to focus on it, or did you try and keep the variety up as long as you could?
yeah. So I do remember around about 16 or 17 years old, just getting to the point where the realization of what you just said then came to me of like, I'm playing all of these sports and I'm quite good at them all, but I'm not that good at just one. Like I'm not good enough at one to be able to like do that for the rest of my life. So a bit like a bit annoyed at myself at that stage, and it got to when you go to university and all sports are played on Wednesday. So that was the kind of point where it's like, right, well, now I just have to choose one because you can't be a part of the football team, hockey team, table tennis team, and every other team going. So I chose football. Just went solely football for the next 4 years, and ended up getting myself to a semi pro level for a season and a half. Um, so yeah, it was kind of forced on me in that sense, and then it kind of showed what you just explained there, of just focusing on that one sport and then excelling in that rather than trying to juggle every
Mm.
sport. Yeah, so it was at that point that I put all the eggs in one basket, and it paid off in a footballing sense anyway.
Yeah, knowing what you know now, I think this is an interesting thing that a lot of coaches think about. Is if you were to raise an athlete, I know you've got your own son now.
Yeah,
When do you push them to specialize? Because I think if you look at some of the best athletes ever, they specialize pretty early. But there's another school of thought which is keep the variety up for as long as possible to develop a broad range of skills and athletic abilities, so that they then have more to
yeah,
them and they aren't so narrowly focused. And I'm
yeah,
not saying that you're going to do that to your son, but if you
yeah.
were trying to build and raise the best athlete possible, do you think it's more down the specialist route, or do you think that the variety of skills that you developed doing all the different sports was part of why you were good at football
Yeah.
eventually?
I think it depends on what do you envisage as the sport that they'll end up doing as the career, and that helps make the decision. If it's CrossFit, then yeah, doing all the different sports it certainly helped me who got into CrossFit at 22 to be able to get to the games like 4 years later. Like, you don't usually make that transition in any other sport, really. Start a
Yeah.
sport at 22 and then be at the top level in 4 years. So that I put a lot of that down to the fact that I did every sport under the sun, and any new skill or any new demand that was put on me, most of the time I could relate it back to something that I'd previously done in some kind of training. If you say that as though as a footballer or someone 100-meter sprinter, you know, do you need to be playing? Should you be playing table tennis 5 hours a week?
Yeah.
I'm not fully convinced. But it's also down to like I just remember like loving loving growing up as a teenager. It'd be, you go to school, there'd probably be a PE lesson on a couple of days a week. After school, it would be after school training for your school, and then it would be like, right, shipped from after school training, wolf down some pasta or something, go to after, like, a club after school that's not part of the school, do that, get home, eat tea, be knocked out, and just do it again the next day. And I just remember just constantly just playing sports, and I just remember loving that as a kid, and just like that's what made me fall in love with sport, and probably what's helped me now like be so like passionate about coaching it as well. So it did shape, it shaped me just being able to play many different sports. Would I have had that same experience and attitude if it was just one sport and it got a bit kind of like monotonous with just the one sport? I'm not sure.
Do you know, it's funny you say this, because it's definitely something which I've toyed with. My daughter's now just over 3, and in my head I'd always, because when I got exposed to CrossFit, obviously not necessarily to the level you did, but when I got exposed to CrossFit, and I loved being able to be like a jack of all trades and being able to kind of do things what most people can't. And I think that's such a cool way to be able to train, and it's nice to specialize. But when I envision my daughter's like getting into fitness and stuff, I wouldn't want it to be like I'm forcing it upon her. And that was definitely something where I was not a sporty kid. I got into training basically in like year 10 in school. So doing biceps in the gym, like that was how I got into it. And it's funny that, so I never got that, like, as you said, being able to get in that, like, that whole team, the whole side of training. And it's something that I never experienced. So I wonder if I do send Chloe down into like kind of that way of training, like getting her into all the different activities. And because I think keeping her quite broad, because picking the sport for her, I think it'll be a rough, like, I guess you might be able to see when, like with your son, okay, oh, he looks like he's got this talent. And I think this is definitely a generational thing. I think our generation, because we've got so much more knowledge now about fitness and about the benefit, like when we were growing up, like it wasn't as in depth as it was now. And obviously it's so much has changed. We've understand more about the body and like younger athletes and stuff. I do wonder now, especially looking at these young CrossFitters, like at the top level, like you got the Haley Adams and stuff, and like they're so young. It's like, what's going to happen in 5 years' time with this much functional fitness on their body? Like they're so strong and so elite. Like, is it a good thing?
Yeah, and I think that was always the question. I don't know, Ash, if you got into CrossFit at a similar time as me or aware of it, but it was kind of a running joke in the 2010, 11, 12, like that we're all going to be broken in 10 years' time, like that no one's, like CrossFit will end in 10 years because everyone's tried it, and we're wheelchair bound, a decade later. But yeah, it's especially with the stuff that Ash teaches now with the training stimulus, the amount of knowledge that's out there to keep people healthy though and doing functional fitness is way more advanced than it was 10 years ago. Like there was literally nothing. This is probably I've recorded 3 podcasts this week, and it's the third time I've said it. I find that my era of CrossFit athletes were the trial and error era. It was literally like there was very few resources. It was CrossFit Journal, Rich Froning documentary, and then that's it. That's literally all you've got to learn from. There wasn't really many gymnastic coaches, weightlifting coaches, kettlebell coaches. Like you had to go out and find it all out yourself. And because of that, a lot of mistakes were made. A lot of things were done wrong to be able to find the right reason. Hence the trial and error. So I feel like we're talking about these young kids getting into CrossFit now at an earlier age. Like for some of them, it's the first sport really that they're taking to, and they're at 10 years old. Just like football or rugby or any other sport is for any usual kid. So you'd like to say that because of the knowledge and the resources, although it still can get a lot better because of what's out there, that they can do this get into it at 10 years old and do it until they're 30 and have a full career without any kind of Serious long-term implications, I'm going to put it. Yeah, I think there'll always be some long-term implications of sport, I think.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Steve, was it's a kind of a recurring theme of sacrifice. I think it's particularly the case in elite performance. Like everyone always says, look at people at the Olympics and the people who achieve at the highest level of any sport. There's sacrifice is always something that they bring up as part of the cost of performing at that high level. And I think the relevance to specializing early, like the benefit is that you have more time practicing your single sport and you probably will be better, but you have to sacrifice the variety and potentially fun and I guess other aspects of your life for that. And something that's come up quite a lot recently has been the mental health sacrifices that the elite of the elite have made. And the Michael Phelps documentary that came out recently and the Tiger Woods one, they both really highlighted how their mindset, which enabled like monstrous winning, actually had really detrimental effects in their personal life. And I think something that I'm starting to see as a trend is, can you have one without the other? I'm not sure if you can be the best of the best without having some sort of mindset sacrifice. What have you seen, like having been to the games and mixed it with the best? Have you seen that as a pattern in your experience? Or on a personal level, do you feel like your really competitive nature has a cost in other areas of your life?
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree. And to the extent where the higher the level of competition and the higher the level of performance that's required, the more sacrifice to your mental health that's taken. And for me, it's more of an after effect of like when the competition's finished, or like when the event or whatever it is, when it's done, it's then like it's trying to, for me, it's trying to like change and get out of that like completely focused like, mental state of what you need to be in the run up until competition and at competition, and then just returning to like normal life and speaking to normal people about normal things, and it not being about like CrossFit, or sport, and performance, and like eating a certain, you have to eat like this and this time to make sure that all of these things added together, like you get that extra like 1%, to then just like as if the event's over and it's like the next day you're back at home, and it's I find it a hard a switch to flip, just to kind of like go from the two, and especially with CrossFit where it's because it's not like super professional just yet, but at the same time the level of performance, like the demand of performance is like so high at the top. There isn't really much support out there until probably recently. I would probably say it's improved, or even just not even support, but just knowledge and just awareness. It's just like any other sport, really, competing in the Olympics and 100-meter sprint, or it's the same thing. You just the next day you wake up and it's like you're just back to being a normal person. People aren't chanting your name in the stands, or other people have stopped watching you now and they're living the life, and then you're just sat there just like twiddling your thumbs trying to get out of this mindset that you've been in for so long, of that everything building up for this event, and then it just stops. So yeah, after 2015, I've said that a few times was a rough one for me, because that was kind of up until that point I've never struggled. It was like competition finished, it was like, right, brilliant, I'll train again tomorrow if I need to. Like I was fine and wouldn't get any mental burnout from at any point. But it was after 2015 games where obviously I'd reached the top that I'd been trying to get to, year after year. Done it, competed there, amazing, fantastic, and then it was just like got home. I spent a couple of weeks out in LA, which again was even was just as good. Got engaged. It was amazing on Muscle Beach, Hermosa Beach. Thinking that this is a life, and then you get home, you're in Wigan, your dog's barking at you, you want to go for a walk. It's pissing down outside and freezing, and you're just like, oh fucking hell! Like there's such a change. It was such a change for me, and just like I'd done a 6-week training camp. Driving down Huntington Beach every day to get to the gym with Dan Bailey and Briggsy and Saba and Phil Hesketh Bjorgvin. It was just like you're just surrounded by like all these people. Like Karen Porter, was there, and you're in around these people every day, and you've got coaches on hand every day, and then it's just like it was such a change. And I think only now that when I've kind of accepted that I'm not going to put myself in that position anymore to be a competitor, do you really realize like what you did sacrifice like on a daily occurrence for your mental health to get the performance? And that's what does hold me back. Like physically, I know that I could probably like to start training, and if all of the kind of mental health stuff didn't exist, like it just wasn't a thing, like physically I would go and I would just thrash myself day to day. But it's putting up with the sacrifices of the way that you've got to think, how the selfishness you've got to be around like your family and your friends. But just like I've done it enough times, and I'm really happy with the achievements done in my career. So now I don't need to do it. I don't need to do it again, if that makes sense. And when I put it that way, it's easy to compete anymore.
Is the so I remember seeing on social that you went more bit of a weightlifting specific period. Was that mainly because of when you had your son, and so it was an easier way to kind of downregulate some volume but still have that competitive nature, or was that just like did you just needed a break from CrossFit?
Yeah, to be honest, it was something. So getting stronger had always been something that I'd needed to have done. Like from a background of playing many different sports, the capacity and the skills came quite quick. I was building. I don't think I'd done a deadlift or a back squat until I was 22 years old. So building just like some raw strength was what I needed to do. So most times it'd come around an off season, I'd get myself like pretty strong, and then I always, because it was snatch and clean and jerk, the fun exercises to do, I would always be like, I started training with Sean Clegg, who was a Commonwealth Games weightlifter, and he got me into the odd little bit, the Northern Open, and then I did the English champs, and I was always kind of like, just as I was getting good at weightlifting, my numbers were getting good, it was like, right, CrossFit season started. Like, let's just sacrifice a little bit of that top end strength and make sure we're rounded going in. So yeah, it was a little bit of always kind of wanting to fully dabble into that and do a full season of it. And exactly what you've said there is just, for me, I knew that I could train 3 to 4 times a week, 2 hours at a time, snatch, clean jerk, squat, pull. And they were the main things that I needed to do. And I knew that I could do that for a year and not have the thought of, I need to be rowing my 5K at like close to 17 minutes. I need to be deadlifting 180 kilos for 15 reps unbroken, and like all the gymnastic, like trying to keep yourself at the standards of all across the board for 2 exercises. Like it felt easy. It felt like an easy thing for me. Like, so, and I fancied that. Unfortunately, my shoulder got dislocated doing some Marines training camp, which is just completely I regret that so bad.
I just want to step back to the sacrifice side of things, Steve. With everything you've just talked about there and everything you've learned through personal experience, how do you apply that as a coach, knowing that to unlock the best performance out of your athletes, you're asking them to sacrifice quite a lot? And is it a case of sharing your experience with them to almost have them expect the come down after a big competition, or do you do things in advance to try and mitigate the come down? Because it's kind of new ground in coaching that people have only really acknowledged this to be a serious thing, and it's something I'm very curious to learn more about.
Yeah, and to be honest, in the last year, kind of especially with like COVID being around, with there not being a single competition for nearly 2 years, so then there's like a big, like for when this last season came around and it was like quarterfinals and semi-finals, like a big build up to that. It became more relevant then with the athletes that I coach as well. And to be honest, I think the main thing is just making them aware that this is how you feel now before your competition. You feel like 1 month out, 2 weeks out, like how focused they're becoming, and then like they're dialing it in, and just letting them be aware that like, look, the next week after the competition is going to be like such a confusing week for you to be able to deal with, because you can't just gradually ramping up this like intensity in your mindset leading up to competition, and then you can't just expect just to switch and be back to a normal normal mind frame. So it's just being aware, and then it's something that I'm continuously trying to learn and help with. And I do feel like every athlete is a little bit different with how they deal with what helps them after a competition. Is some people just like completely getting away from CrossFit or the sport that they're doing, and trying to just to fill that time void that they might have used to have spent training, and that the time void of just like in the mental space as well, of like what they were continuously think about, like how can they keep the brain still functioning but still letting it relax at the same time. And I think it is a tough balance, and I know I need to learn about it more to help my athletes more, no doubt. And they're constantly listening to like the high performance podcasts, and there's some great kind of just advice from ex-pros, current pros, the coaches of those pros. Even just like Sky Sports News documentaries, and during lockdown, there's a lot of ex-footballers on there talking about things like that as well. And I think the more it's spoken about, I think the more we'll start having like, well, this is a recommended protocol that after a competition, how you can severely ease like that, well, call it depression, call it whatever you want to call it. Really, for a lot of people, it is because you just suddenly just get caught. You just get caught out of just like, well, what's my purpose day to day, because I've not got this competition anymore. And it can easily just kind of spiral into a nasty place. So yeah, the more that there is out there, I think the more time it's spoken about. People, like yourselves and like I, will come up with kind of like, right, for the next 4 weeks, other than the training program, this is your kind of like the program outside of the gym to minimize the effects that you might come across from this dump of after a competition.
I definitely feel that you've got the experience then, and it's so and same with myself, is in like, and I know when you've gone through things yourself, even if it's not to necessarily the highest level, you understand that the struggles that you might have to come across. So then when your athletes do say to you, cool, this is happening, even though you told them, look, you're gonna feel crap, you're gonna feel this, and then it's like when they come to you and say like, I'm feeling really bad, and it's just like you and you're like, I did tell you, but you have to experience this. I can only warn you so much, but I think it's such a good perspective as a coach to be able to really sympathize and have that empathy for the person, to understand that it's hard, and it's like, but nothing verbally will prepare you for that feeling. And I think it just gives you the opportunity to just be able to hold their hand, and just, I think, as you say, like, as having the experience of being able to get to the highest part of the sport, being at the games, and essentially having the weight of being the first British person to the games. Again, that's another level of intensity added to your experience. It's insane. So I think it's such a good so like string to your bow that you really do have that experience?
And I think so I experienced it again just in the semi-finals just gone as a coach, but you're thinking, oh, you only experienced that as an athlete, but it's just the same build-up of intensity and the same still mentally sacrificing just as much, potentially probably even more as a coach to guide your athletes to this point. But then you think about, all right, well, I need to make sure I'm helping my athletes after the event as well, but you need to help yourself as a coach after that. And you know what, it also transfers into other walks of life. Like, you're a business owner, or you're let's say you're in a job, let's say you're a nurse or a doctor at NHS, and you have the whole COVID thing to deal with, and then just say it stops, and then, or you're a business owner and you're building up, you've got this project that's about to launch, or this event, and then it stops. Or you do it and then it's like on to the next thing. I just think it is just that it's that sacrifice of just putting all of your mindset into one thing and then just being aware of, like, all right, well, when is that gonna end or ease off, and like, how do you deal with that change there, whether you're an athlete, coach, business owner, whatever you are. I think it's very similar, to be honest.
Yeah, that seems to be the trend. Like, all the Olympians in the Phelps documentary were saying that it's the void that's left once the Olympics is over, because you have such a singular focus that you're pouring everything into it, like your sleep, your nutrition, all your spare time spent thinking about it. And as soon as it's removed, they don't know who they are, because they're just like, I was an athlete until yesterday, and today I actually don't know what I'm supposed to do with my time. So I think anyone who's got a big focus will suffer it.
Yeah. I've actually, I'm 5 sessions in with a psychologist for the exact thing that you've just said there. Of it kind of just come round. I've been toying with the idea of like retiring, not retiring, come back, go, like in between things. I've been doing that because I would lose that void, and now we're just like, right, I've got to get it back. And it's got to the point now where I can't keep just trying to 3 or 4 hours a day, run myself into the ground in the gym. But then filling that void, and it was exactly that. Like, well, what is my purpose? Like, and it made you feel worse because, well, for anyone else that knows me, well, your purpose is you're a dad and you're a husband. You've got 2 successful businesses. Like, that's your purpose. But it's like, it's not the same. It's just not the same personal purpose that you're just used to from being from what for me was probably a 6-year-old all the way up until 33 years old now. So quick maths, 27 years. It's not the same void. So yeah, I'd been working with a psychologist that's exactly just helping me that, like, figuring out who I am other than Stephen Fawcett, the athlete, or the sports player. It's not easy.
It's so interesting seeing how the childhood experiences lay down such foundations for your adult life. Like, obviously competitive spirit was such a big part of your youth that's let you be so successful in everything you've done so far, but now you're sort of coming out the other side of it and realizing that you need to manage it. Something I wanted to ask you about is, we often talk about the different sides of CrossFit versus like the GPP for the average sort of health and fitness enthusiast versus the competitor. How would you describe the decision-making process of, like, given you're so competitive, it was quite an obvious decision, I'm sure, but for the average person, how do they know how competitive they want to be? Because I think that's something I always ask somebody who I start working with is, you like CrossFit, you want to compete, but how much do you actually want to compete? Because there are a lot of different levels. And what's your experience working with people at different ends of the spectrum?
Yeah, I had a very similar chat with Jack on our podcast. It's what was kind of about, really. It was the journey of a competitive CrossFitter from the point at which you, discover CrossFit, and then you do it a few times, and then usually people, they go down a certain path depending on how they react to their experience of CrossFit. Some people are just happy, like that's just their way of bit of an outlet after work, or but just keeping fit and strong. They've got no interest really in spending more than an hour a day, 3 to 4 times a week. And that's where that GPP kind of falls in perfectly for them, where keeps them excited, keeps them fun, varied, challenges in different ways every time they turn up, makes them fitter, stronger, healthier, and potentially better at the stuff that they're going to do day to day in their life, whether it is helping with just keeping them healthier so they stay in work for longer, or can run around the garden with the child, or whatever it is. And I think it's hard for me to relate to that person because I've never actually had that mindset. But I know that people have that mindset. So that's where the GPP side comes in. As we spoke about, like, my mind frame is always, if I found something and enjoy it, then it's getting taken to an unhealthy level of obsession. So for me, what we'd highlighted on the podcast with Jack and Carl last week was that Carl was someone who he wanted to take it to the next level, but he just wanted to do it for his personal development. Like, he wanted to just put a bit more in, so he was just working on things where he could get stronger and he could complete all of these skills that were like that he was asked to do, and he could do them to a good level. But he wasn't that bothered about like taking it to like the next step. We weren't too bothered about competing and beating people or getting to the top of the sport. But yeah, for me and for Jack as well, we were just like, yeah, we do want to get to the top of the sport with it. And then we were just like, right, well, the decisions that you make and the training programs and how you attack this, although it looks probably from the outside in like similar exercises, it just becomes a whole different approach.
Yeah, I think something that's refreshing to hear you say is that you pursue it to an unhealthy level, and that's something we also talk about regularly, is that performance, health, and aesthetics are all distinct things. And you think a lot of people would think really fit people are also really healthy, but there are sacrifices to be made for absolute performance. There is a trade-off against health, and I think anyone who trains really hard, even if they're just like a box warrior, has to acknowledge that, maybe pushing yourself super hard very regularly has a negative impact on your health once you cross a certain inflection point. And that's just the reality of elite performance, that you can't have the maximum longevity if you want to perform at the highest level.
Do you know, I think when it comes to those box warriors, as you said there, I think the struggle, I think, is not necessarily the training, it's the recovery side of things, because then they'll try and go by their day to day and they'll try and be working at such a high, that's, I think the difference with like the professional, like the high end athlete, is they understand you need the balance. Whereas I think you got a lot of people, it's go, go, go. It's the mentality of more is always better. And I think that's where they normally then burn out and get into a position. Whereas I say with like the more elite person, they understand, cool, I need to take a bit of a deload week or take a bit of a step off the gas just for a bit and then pick back up. And I think that's where it's such a, CrossFit is such a, I think, where you said it depends on your first couple of sessions and where you kind of go with CrossFit. And for me, it was like, because I was coming from like a powerlifting background, I loved it. And I loved the competitiveness and I loved the being around people working hard. But then I never understood to kind of, I struggled with recovery something because I was a personal trainer as well. So my hours of work, and at the time I was following JST as well. I was doing that that was everything for me. And I was burnt into the ground because I was working, I wasn't recovering. And that was, I think, I was the middle person where I'm not elite and I'm not bottom, and I struggled with that.
Yeah, and that's a kind of a big area of, now that we've become aware of it in JST as well, and the kind of the information that we're giving the athletes in the program. I would say 90% of people on are on JST to compete are in that level now. Like, they want to compete, they love it, but they do have other priorities and other things going on, and it's about keeping them at the highest level that they can get to, whilst like staying away from that burnout to the point where they just go, do you know what, sack it off. Which I feel like a lot of people have come across in the CrossFit lifetime. Yeah, but it's funny what you say, Ash. Actually, I feel like you've been watching me. So for the last 4 months, like been following me around or something with the questions that you've been asking. It's a little bit creepy, to be honest. But so I started
Shit.
playing. I started playing a little bit of football again. Yeah, I found you out. I saw you. Started playing a little bit of football again, just because for me it was kind of like I've always loved playing football, and I never really hit that point of football where I fell out of love with it. Um, and it's just like whether it's a 1 hour training session, 90-minute match, you literally can't think of anything else other than football. And that for me was just like it's kind of in a way a meditation really of just like letting your mind go elsewhere. But I played football so 2 nights ago, and I drove back home, and I needed to fill up in my car, and I got out of the car to fill up, and oh, my body was just like wrecked. I was just so sore, like knees, Achilles, hips, back, like everything, apart from my feet, my toes, like everything was just sore. And just at that point, I had a flashback of the last 10 years of what I've done. Just like in 5 seconds, just this flashback of every training session that I've done, and I just started laughing to myself, thinking, no normal person does what and has done what like I've put myself through in the last 10 years, and I still don't think that anyone other than someone who's like also put themselves to that level will understand.
Mm. It's a
Only
lot of
when I
miles on the
speak to
clock.
yeah, only when I speak to like Björgvin or Sarah or Phil, when we were in that year we were around each other a lot, and we all kind of knew what we were doing. Do we just like sometimes just laugh because some of the weightlifting sessions and weightlifting 101 and some of the conditioning sessions that we've done just they're far from like I knew for a fact that I was not making myself healthier by doing that exercise like that training session. Um, yeah, it was far from training for health, and it just felt as if like it all just as soon as I got out of the car the other night, that it all just like hit me in one go. Um, and then yesterday I was in the gym, and I did 20 minutes of C2 bike at 150 watts, and every 2 minutes I might have done like 10 ring rows or 20 box step ups or something. I was like, this is actually what normal people should be doing in
Yeah.
training, because I actually feel quite good when I do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like, yeah. So
I
it's a
think, yeah,
big
it's a personal
realization.
decision point, isn't it? Of just where on that spectrum do you want to position yourself? Like, what trade off do you want to make of health versus performance? And
Yeah,
there's no right answer. Everyone does things which are not optimal for their health in all areas of life, but you get other benefits. Like, you get fun from drinking alcohol, you get like
yeah,
satisfaction from training a bit too hard. So there's no
yeah.
absolute rights and wrongs. And I
No,
think,
no,
yeah,
no.
you've just got to
Yeah,
make
I wouldn't.
peace
I
with
wouldn't.
whatever your balance
I
is.
wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it different if you started me from the beginning. I wouldn't do it any different.
Brilliant. So I guess one theme of JST is JST Compete is the main program. I guess I might correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm interpreting it as you're taking lessons from competing at the elite level and applying them to people at all levels on that like desire to compete front. What are the key learnings you've had from seeing and being in the elite, and how you adapt that to people who have less competitive aspirations?
Um, I think the main challenge that I come across kind of daily is the thought process of what's the most effective session to put into this training program right now, and on then trying to put myself in the mind frame of one of the guys that are going to be following the program as to what's going to be the most effective thing for them in the long term in terms of like, well, I think we could probably all agree that we do the same. You do 1 week of training, and you repeat that week of training for 4 or 5 weeks, and you're going to get better results than 4 or 5 weeks of adjusted training. So, but then the client, the athlete on the other side, wants that bit more of a fun and a bit of a different kind of aspects. So they're going to turn up to train and be excited about it. So it's that constant battle for me. I was always someone that you could just give me that one training program, 1 week. Well, give me a 1 week training program. I'll repeat it for 4 weeks and actually love that. Like love feeling the progression, how things are like adapting and changing, and I'd get addicted to that feeling. But I'm fully aware that, that's not the mindset that every person has. So it's trying and mimic the same results that you would get in a more varied and fun way, to keep someone on the same path. And I think that's the weekly discussion that I have with Jack and Phil and myself, to make sure we're balancing that to get the best results we can in a long-term cycle rather than just like a sharp 6 weeks.
I do think that, especially, I guess one of the struggles that, because I'm the same, as I like to follow something for say 4 to 6 weeks, because you feel better as you go on. Everything starts, the groove gets greased, you're feeling great by the end of it, and you normally perform like whatever it is at the end of that cycle, you're in a better place. And I think because we train how much we enjoy it, we train by choice, it's what we do. When you got someone that's doing it because they not necessarily feel they have to, but it's not necessarily their passion or their drive, that's where they're always looking for that variation. And it's like, even though they know probably deep down, if they do the same thing for 4 to 6 weeks, they're going to get better. They're just not, it's not in a bad way, but they're just not committed enough to it in a way, because it's not their thing. They're doing it because they want to feel better. They know they'll feel better, but it's just, I think that buy-in, and that is definitely for the general public, that buy-in is so key, and it is that balance, isn't it, as a coach, to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, we in one of our strength bias programs last season, we put the guys through I think it was 12 weeks, a 12-week squat program, and it was kind of like it was split into 4 blocks, and each block was the same. So it was the same squat session, and there was some kind of guidelines as to make sure there's some reps in reserve, or it's just like a little bit less on RPM, and it's a little bit higher the next week and a bit higher the next week. So it wasn't just kind of like max out on the same thing every single week. And the results were like phenomenal. People were putting 20 kilos on front squats, back squats. It was transferring over into cleans, into snatches, and just like, I was a bit shocked at the amount of the amount of PBs that we were seeing. And we frequently put out just like a questionnaire to the athletes: how you find training, like, enjoying it, anything you'd like to see different. And although that we had some of the biggest results that we had on that strength program that we've ever had, a lot of the feedback was that we'd like to see it more varied and not to do the same thing. I was just like, just put 20 kilos on your back squat. You're on a strength bias program. Like, what the fuck can I do? Yeah. But it was just like, right. So it's just like, we have to still try and get those results. If for example we made it varied and that was a 10 kilo improvement, would they be more interested to stay involved and train year round? Or if we're doing it for the 12 weeks and they get 20 kilos improvements, are they more likely to fall off the bandwagon because they're enjoying it? So it's that battle, and you have that battle. The athletes that are going to have that battle are the guys that are at that competitive level, but they're not fully involved in it to get to the top, because those guys at the top, you give them 20 kilos back squat PB in 12 weeks and they're snapping your hand off and they're going to carry on. So yeah, that's the balancing act.
That's amazing to have that insight through the data, that you can literally see that at that level of athlete, they prefer fun over results to some extent, or they would trade a little bit of results for more fun. And it's something that we kind of intuitively know, but with that behind the scenes number collecting, I think it's it's quite a privileged position. And I think definitely. I always reflect on it like, boring is effective. So how much fun do I need to build in to keep somebody bought in? I think the other thing that puts people off the boring side of things is the accountability. There's no hiding. If you do the same session every week, you can see clearly if you're not putting if you are having a down day or something like that, you don't perform as well as you did the week before. There is no hiding, which is a positive because it keeps you accountable and it means you can really clearly see your progress. But it also means that if you're not trying today, or you're sandbagging it, there's no hiding place. And I think the variety for a lot of people is their way of hiding from that accountability, because you're never comparing apples with apples. Like, oh yeah, I sweated, so I worked hard, but did you actually work hard unless you're actually putting some extra kilos on the bar?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, Steve, was your multi-sport experience. I saw you dabbled with some time trial cycling, and I want you to give us some thoughts comparing, the time trial stuff, CrossFit, and also table tennis, because it's quite a nice spectrum of sports in that it's monostructural, cycling, cardio, CrossFit's super varied, and then table tennis is high skill. What would you say are the key common threads between them, and also the key differences?
It's a good question. I've found from doing CrossFit for 10 years, I just found the transition into cycling and time trials as the way I need to approach cycling. It just seems so like simple. It was just I'm doing this one. I know the exercise for starters. I know there's only one of them. I know the distance. I know when the race is going to be. And it was like so many unknowns just taken out as a CrossFit coach and athlete. A lot of that is what you've got to juggle day to day of, like, is the unknown element of what you're doing. So simply for them to just be like, right, well, it's a 25-mile race. This is the route. You go and have a look at it if you want. Then in the months leading up to it, go and race it. Every week if you really fancy. This is the bike you'll be using. You can actually change the bike if you want. You wear whatever kit you want as long as it's in regulations. So just to be like, right, well, I've got the time domain. I've got the pace that I know I can hold. Like, training and that's what I liked about cycling. It was just simplified. It was just easy. And it just came down to, like, my effort, really. Yeah, there's a bit of technique with, like, positioning on the bars and get help here and there, and how you approach hills and downhills and drafting. I always get it mixed up. But pretty much all of it is just head down, head down and work. Yeah. So that's what I enjoy about cycling. It was just take away the whole, like, thought process of what you constantly have to be going through as a CrossFit athlete. The difference for table tennis, what I remember is, like, it's the other end of the spectrum where, again, no match is the same, no opponent's the same. The rules are obviously, you're playing to 11 and you get 2 serves each, and it's best out of 5. If that's still the rules. That was the rules, and I used to play anyway. But there were so many other little variations. It became a bit more like a chess match in terms of, like, how you think and how you play. And that's what really made me like table tennis in the same way. It wasn't always about, like, trying your hardest. It was about being, like, switched on and tuned in and trying to, like, outwit your opponent. Like, what bat have they got? Is it pimples, or have they got, like, are they using speed glue, or what? Is it a fast rubber, or is it tacky? Like, there's so many little tiny elements which would affect how you would have to make every single shot and how you worked them around the table. So it just complete end of spectrums. And I guess for me I just liked that's probably why I liked CrossFit, because you got both of that. But then also, like, when you don't have to do both, it feels really easy just to have to go back to doing one of them again.
I think because I got into some cycling as well, and it's like, for me, I loved cycling because it was very much like strength training. It's very simple. It's like percentage based. You do this, you work a threshold, you work a VO2, you work certain areas, and you got a task at hand that you have to do. And I found the reason I found cycling then quite easy to say kind of endure is from things like CrossFit, where you get the capacity of, having to say, dig deep into workouts. And, so as you'll know, you get towards a hill or something like that, and you get to the point where you have the decision to stop and ease off, or you push through. And those people that do push through, especially on a hill, because everyone has to go up that same hill. And once you hit the peak, if you keep pushing just over the peak and continue, you notice that it's so much of an easier ride. Whereas if you hit the peak and then slow, it's still hard because you haven't cleared it. And I found that CrossFit, like being able to end yourself on like the assault bike, the rower, the just in workouts in general, being able to take yourself to that level, I found cycling, because for me, whenever I go out on a cycle now, I look for the hills. I love the hills because that's the work. It's not all the bit in between is just the recovery. It's like, don't get me wrong, you go down a flat threshold, it's going to be hard. But I'm saying the hills is where you have to, you hit it with intent, but also you have to purpose as well. You have to know when to get out the saddle and stuff. And I found cycling was such a nice monostructural thing where it is just effort. And that was such a fun thing about it. And time trial is definitely something I wish I'd tried, and I might still try because I do enjoy cycling. So.
I'd recommend having a go at time trial, especially someone at our build, like we're probably more suited to a time trial than a hilly race. But yeah, like a 10-mile time trial, you're basically doing your FBT test every week. So it does challenge you in that sense. But yeah, it's like, that's what I like to get, like you said about cycling there, is you're up that hill and you've got to go full effort, but you've only got to cycle. You only got to go right leg, left leg, right leg, left leg, as hard as you can. Like, you've not got to be going full effort and thinking about like your body positioning and this ring muscle up while your heart rate's at the same level. You're not having to, dial in like and execute a 100 kilo snatch while you're at max effort, max threshold as well. So, but I get that's why we love CrossFit, because it's executing those high performances and high skill, and just like that just mixing them both together to get the result. But over time, it does make you realise that actually, if you just do one exercise, you actually get a lot better at it.
Surprise. Yeah.
Like I got really good at cycling from just doing cycling. Like, who would have known?
I got suckered into the trap though. I then got into triathlon, and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. So then I took my effort, because then was getting good at cycling, decided to start running and swimming, realised how shit I was at swimming, and had to really double down on that. And then my cycling suffered. I was like, for fuck's sake. And then I got COVID, and then it all went to shit. So I was like, right, back to powerlifting.
One third I wanted to pull on a bit harder there, Steve, was you said about the time trial. One of the things you liked was that you knew everything in advance. And it's something we've spoken about before with CrossFit versus other functional fitness races, the unpredictability of events. And I think it makes things exciting from an audience perspective for sure, and also from an athlete perspective if you don't quite know what's going to be in the events coming up. But something that we discussed a few years ago now is how that might limit it being recognized as a sport by people outside of the sport, and potentially how it can get into something like the Olympics. Could you give us your thoughts on the future of CrossFit maybe, and the trade-off that they're making by having unknown random events versus pre-programmed that everyone can train towards? And I guess it removes that heads-up decision-making of being able to strategize a workout on the fly, versus we went to a High Rocks event last night, and the High Rocks World Championships have the same workout structure every single time. So all the athletes are preparing very specifically for that distance, time domain, movements. There's a lot of information there. So maybe just speak your mind. Let us know what you think.
I don't think CrossFit will ever move away from like the events being different every single time. Maybe there might become a checklist of like things that need to be tested, and each event like other than the event itself, just say like what the event is, maybe just some like elements of like what it tests, so that an outsider looking in can be like, well, they don't just look at every CrossFit event and go, like it looks very similar in the sense that they're just doing loads of random exercises. Like, so you can just like show like what's event one testing of this competition, what's event two, and then you can kind of see at the end of the event that like all of these elements that have been like highlighted that's going to test fitness have all been hit to an equal manner, and that's how we've created the winner has become the fittest of, on earth. I think what CrossFit needs to do is like there's a level. I don't think the competition in terms of the events needs to be like the same, but like in terms of the rule book, the professionalism, the consistency year on year, the qualification process, like it's never going to become an elite sport, because what the IOC will look at is like, right, well, how do you get to the CrossFit Games? Like, how do you get to the Olympics? And if we turn around and go, well, actually, depends what year, actually, because in 2015 it was this way, and these were the regions. In 2014 it was completely different. The team event was 6, but then it was 4, and then you had to be in a gym, but then you didn't, but now you have to be back in a gym. And it's just like no one's taking that to the Olympics. Like, oh, by the way, you could just actually make a little bit of noise on Instagram, and then you'd go to the CrossFit Games. Like, I think there needs to be a prolonged period. I feel like this structure that we had last season, minus the virtual events, is the right one. I think it's good. I think it's consistent. It's clear. It's a clear path. It's nearly fair in terms of opportunity around the world for someone to get there. Does need a bit more for Europe, if I'm being honest. But I feel like if they held that for 5 years, the athletes began to actually then know. Someone who's 17 years old now making that decision of like, I'm going to take this on from here, can actually make that decision because they know what they're going to be doing for the next 5 or 10 years of the career. And it's not just like in the hands of, a few American people sat around a table that'll just kind of like on the fly change their mind from what it feels like anyway. So I think that needs to be like, that's the main thing that would hold it back from Olympic sport, I feel like. As long as they had like what I said in the beginning there of like what each event is testing and how they can show that every event in terms of how it's been programmed will class that event as a legit test of overall fitness. I feel like a spectator looking in, no matter your level of knowledge of CrossFit, will be able to like accept that and take it on board. Because I think we've all kind of had that argument where we say that CrossFit, Matt Fraser's the fittest on earth, but then someone goes, but this triathlete, the Brownlee brothers are faster than him, can swim faster and run faster, so they're fitter. It's just like it's the definition of what people define as fitness. I think CrossFit's definition of fitness, because there's so many elements, makes it hard for people to understand. Whereas triathlon is so just like simple and just like straightforward. It's easy to understand. Some people are going to take the argument of the Brownlee brothers against Matt Fraser, for example, because they can understand that, but they don't understand CrossFit because it's just so varied.
Yeah, I like that.
Guidelines
I like
that
that
people can understand.
Exactly. It's almost like they need to be able to link every event to the 10 key physical skills to show that, one, they're balanced across the 10 key physical skills, to show that they're all tested at the games.
Yeah.
And that there is some predictability in how you're going to be tested as an athlete, so you can prepare effectively without knowing what the events specifically are in advance.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're just up on time, and I know you're a busy man, so we'll let you go, Steve.
Mm.
Yeah,
I just
flies,
looked up. I was like, "Geez."
It does.
Yeah.
Could I?
Thank
That's
you.
good.
Yeah.
Could I
Go on,
just get one thing on that? So I did want to kind of touch on that functional fitness rating of the UK side, because that was obviously the opportunity to kind of standardise it. Because I know you was part of that, and I don't know to what level, but it's in like, what do you see that didn't work there necessarily to have kept it going, or is it still going now, just not to the level that it could be? It's still looking room for growth.
It's still going. I stepped back just before COVID hit, actually, because I just couldn't give it my personal time to give it what it needed as a president of the governing body to be able to like actually excel it. 'Cause I had the business, I had family, and I had to keep going with that. So I stepped down to open up the opportunity for someone who's got the time to be able to take it where it needs to go. It's still existing, I think, because it was funded by the CEO for the majority of the first 2 years, and then COVID hit. It was just like that really just knocked that governing body on its arse a little bit. The IF3, International Functional Fitness governing body, is very much like out there and doing things to help. I think the barrier it came across was that people thought it was against CrossFit. They thought that we were trying to like challenge CrossFit, whereas really, if you think of CrossFit as the Ironman event and functional fitness as triathlon governing body, like Ironman, the participation in Ironman like severely improved once triathlon governing body was formed, because it professionalised the sport and it gave funding, it gave opportunity and facilities.
Yeah.
So that was what it's all about. It was about creating that governing body to be able to support athletes. CrossFit would be one of the events. High Rocks might be one of the events that's also under the Functional Fitness Federation like umbrella. There'd be other commercial events, but there needed to be a governing body that was recognised, that had some kind of standardisation, to be able to get the UK sport funding and support England and give the opportunities that way.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, mate.
No problem.
Really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
No problem. We're going to have to get back to some actual work now.
Yeah. Cheers. All right. Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate your time, mate. We'll speak to you soon.
No problem.
Thank you, Steve, for coming onto the podcast. Great insight there into elite performance and, maybe some of the mental health issues that can come along with performing at the highest level. So really interesting insights, and thank you again for coming on. And thank you for listening to today's episode. We hope you got some little nuggets to take away from it and maybe take into your own training, maybe think about how you approach your goals or your health and fitness. As always, thank you for your time. If you did enjoy this episode, please do share it around, get ourselves out there even more. And also, if you do want to find out some more, check out some of the other episodes that we've gone through, check out our website, www.lungeandlift.com, and we've got all our episodes up there, some insights in there. We've also got a We Recommend page where all the little bits of kit and stuff that we recommend to our clients and other listeners. So check that out. As always, please leave us a review on iTunes. We would really appreciate that. And I think that's about it. I can't really ask for much more. Ash, anything else you want to ask the listeners?
Tune in next week, please. Keep it going.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Thanks,
and
guys.
We'll see you next week.
Cheers.